All right, everybody. This is Meteorologist Brad Panovich. Had to reset my camera there. The camera might focus here for a second. We're trying something a little different tonight. We're doing an Ask Brad, and you may be watching on YouTube, you might be watching on Facebook, or you might be watching on our app. We are actually streaming to all three simultaneously. So if there's some lag or something goes wrong, I just want to tell you what we're doing right now. I can actually see all the comments in one place, which is nice. So I can comment whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook right now, all in one spot. So let's get right to Dorian right now. That's obviously what everyone's talking about, even though Dorian is way down here in the Caribbean. Now, the storm is not what I would call particularly healthy looking system. If you look carefully, the center's up in here. There are a bunch of thunderstorm towers. That's what those brighter colors are. That's cooling with height. So as the brighter the color, that means the temperature's cooler. Basically, the higher the thunderstorm clouds are. There's Puerto Rico. They're concerned about this storm, not so much because of wind or surge. Primarily, this is going to be a big time rain event for Puerto Rico. Very mountainous country, so the rain would be a big issue for many areas. So I'll scroll down through here and get as many questions as I can. Getting some great Facebook questions. Hey, Nick Carboni, man, actually sent me a comment on YouTube, which is great. So I'll read those as I go, but I'll get into all the specifics here. So here's the system right now. It's entraining some dry air and on the south side. That's why the system is kind of lopsided looking. And I'm going to advance this to the water vapor loop, and you can kind of see what's going on here. Pretty significant looking water vapor loop here, because you could see all of that really dry air wrapping all the way around and getting in here, and really dry air here. And if you notice these clouds going like this, that's wind shear. So the environment here is really hostile. You can see the outflow, and this is how you know dry air is winning. The outflow is going off in this direction. The inflow at the lowest level sucking in the dry air. So look at all that dry air. The whole south side of the storm is kind of open, we call it. So that allows dry air to get into the storm, which actually can choke the system off. And it's not doing that because the storm has got a small central core right in here, but it is keeping it from getting stronger right now. And I don't expect it to get stronger because it's moving into an area that is actually even less favorable. We've got dry air, shear, and mountains. Now, the one caveat to that is, and I'm going to erase that real quickly if I can get that off the screen, is the fact that it's trending a little farther north, and it may pass more over Puerto Rico and east, which is actually a little bit more favorable up in here. This is the graveyard of the Atlantic for tropical systems. I don't know if people remember, back in 2015, we had this storm Erica that was coming like this, and the cone was essentially over most of Florida. Florida was under a state of emergency, and everyone was freaking out, and the storm completely died here. It disintegrated. We went from a 5-day cone over Florida to it just basically disappearing. That's a possibility, but I put that at a 1 in 3 chance of happening right now. There's still, a 2 in 3 chance this thing's going to make it further north. And if it does, the environment over the Bahamas becomes a little bit more favorable over time as it moves to the north and west. So real quickly, I'm going to widen this view a little bit just so you can see in relationship to the United States how tiny that system actually is. So here are the stats as of 8 o'clock tonight. I'll throw them up there. You can see, let me erase there. There we go. At 8 p.m., and I'll actually remove my face there for a second so you don't have to see that over the screen. 8 p.m., it's 300 miles southeast Puerto Rico, Ponce, Puerto Rico. Winds are at 50 miles per hour. It's moving west-northwest at 13, and the pressure is about 1,005 millibars, which isn't actually particularly strong. That's a pretty weak system right now. It is not strengthening. I saw Eric's comment there. It is not strengthening right now. There are no signs that it's doing that at this moment. But if it gets north of the islands, that's when we'll have to see if the thing begins to strengthen. Just a heads up for folks in Puerto Rico, this is a look at all the advisories, warnings, and watches which are currently in effect. You can see tropical storm warnings currently in effect for most of Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Eastern Dominican Republic. So I think the storm is going to pass more in this area right now, the way it's looking, but it could go a little here or here, but Puerto Rico is certainly going to get a pretty significant impact from the rainfall at the very least. Here was the 5 o'clock advisory. One thing about these advisories, just as a kind of a logistical thing, even though this is 8 p.m., the intermediate advisories are called, they only update the location of the storm and movement and pressure if there's a hurricane hunter, they do not change the forecast. They only do the forecast at 5 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Eastern, and 11 a.m. Eastern. So it's a four times a day kind of cycle for these systems. As it gets closer to land, we get more frequent updates on positioning. So here was the 5 p.m. advisory. Excuse me. At 11 o'clock, we'll get the new advisory. You can see the track basically takes it over Puerto Rico, and then it reemerges out here sometime on Thursday. So this is when things get interesting, because the environment over the Bahamas, very warm water, very low wind shear, and not as dry air. So there's potential that it could strengthen over that area. Then it moves towards the west. Now, why is it going to make this left-hand turn or a westerly movement? Well, there's a big ridge of high pressure over the Atlantic, which is expected to build back towards the west, which would force it towards Florida. That's probably the biggest question mark in this, is how strong that ridge is and where it sets up. But right now, that would push it towards Florida on Sunday. Now, I've been putting out this kind of pay attention zone, and I do this just so people can get a heads up past the 5-day cone. And when you're in this pay attention zone, that means we don't really know. It's too early for specifics. It may not impact you at all, but it's the area where you should still be paying attention to this storm, because potentially this storm could go up to South Carolina, and certainly the Gulf of Mexico needs to be paying attention to it, because the natural tendency for this is to go something in here. I should also caution you that the cone is basically that. It's a cone of air. The storm could be there, or it could be here, or anywhere in between. I don't like, I have to at least put where the center is guessed to be, I guess, or forecast to be, but in reality it could be anywhere in here, and I don't like putting a straight line in there, because a hurricane, a tropical storm, or depression isn't a point on the map. We know these are broad systems, the impacts are far from the center, so this is just the center of the storm, not the impact. So everybody in the Carolinas still needs to pay attention to this storm as it moves to the north and west. One of my favorite graphics to show is, because this shows the impacts more than just the center, is how far out the tropical storm force winds are expected to be. So Puerto Rico, you've got a 70 to 90% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. And then the Bahamas has a pretty significant chance. And then you see how this thing spreads out by the time we get to Sunday, where we see the threat for tropical storm force winds pretty much the entire peninsula of Florida, but you can kind of see the area with the highest risk right in there. And that's why the Carolinas, technically, especially South Carolina, up to Charleston, there's a 10% chance of tropical storm force winds on Sunday night. So just, that's what I've been trying to give people a heads up for. That's still a possibility. That's why you're in the pay attention mode. But a lot of folks asking about the weekend impacts on the Carolinas, and here we are. This is 9 p.m. on Sunday. So at the very earliest, we could have some winds on the low country of South Carolina, but very unlikely. But the Carolinas wouldn't be even impacted until at the earliest Monday or Tuesday. So overall, the chances of this impacting us on the holiday weekend is pretty low, even if it were to make an abrupt right turn and head right at us, because it still wouldn't be here yet. It's a timing issue more so than is it coming our way. It's so far away still. It's got a long ways to go before it gets here. Some of the hostile environment ahead of it, I like showing the wind shear. You can see that wind shear showing up, the areas in red. Very hostile environment here, very hostile environment here currently. If we go out into the future, I can show you how the environment changes as it gets up towards the Bahamas. Remember, the forecast takes it up here by this time on Friday. The environment becomes a little bit more what I would call neutral to favorable. And then over time, you can see as it moves towards Florida, the conditions become a little bit more favorable. And then look at the eastern Gulf of Mexico this weekend into early next week. So this is not a perfect setup for this storm to really intensify over time. It's really got a very narrow window over the Bahamas if it makes it that far. Now, the biggest driver of the system, obviously, is going to be this ridge of high pressure. We talked quite a bit about this on TV tonight, and I'll talk about this for days, it seems like, because this is what's going to happen. Right now, the storm would go up here like this if it was today. Now, as we go through time, that ridge builds west at the same time. So let's stop this on Friday. You can see our tropical system there, and then this high starts to force it towards Florida. That's why as this ridge builds back towards the west, it shoves it towards the western periphery of this high, and then it moves around the high, and this trough actually helps a little bit as well, weaken that and put a weakness there. And as we go further into time, you can see the system building west, and then it starts to move around. So long term, Monday, it'll be interesting to see on Labor Day if it starts coming back north. If we do see an impact in the Carolinas, it probably would be Tuesday or Wednesday as the moisture comes back up here. But that all depends on strength, speed, and track, which is still a highly uncertain thing. So those are all things that we need to keep on. Someone asked me about the spaghetti plot. I can show you the spaghetti plot, but spaghetti plot is just going to show you the spread and the guidance right now. We don't really get a new update until tonight when the new runs come in. So you get an idea on the spaghetti plots where they are. There's definitely a move towards Florida and then a recurve up here. Now, there are quite a few members of the GFS out here, but there's also a whole bunch here. So it's kind of split down the middle. You still see that's why the forecast track is here. So that's why, South Carolina still needs to pay attention, and why, if I were to put my pay attention zone, that's kind of why you do it there. But it'll be interesting to see if this turn towards the northeast happens on Tuesday, and then eventually you could see that's when we'll probably have some kind of rainfall or something. The other thing is, this is just the track. Intensity forecasting is a total crapshoot when it comes to this stuff. I'm not going to lie to you. The weakest part of forecasting tropical systems are intensity forecasts. We've got a good idea on track. We do really, really well. But intensity forecast is still the weakest part of our forecast. So it's really hard to nail down the exact intensity because there's so many small things that go on the storm. Right now, the storm is not expected to be very strong. But as it moves to the north and west, I talked about this track, and let me play this real quick, over the Bahamas and how warm that water is. I'll zoom this in real quickly. You can see the water temperatures, especially over the central and southern Bahamas, pushing 90 degrees up here. 87 here, 85. So 80 degrees and above is perfect fuel. There's plenty of warm water there. If anything is going to deter this system, it's going to be one, dry air, which has been beating the storm up for days, wind shear, and then interaction with the big islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, which have huge mountains which would impact the storm as well. The wind shear being provided right now, you might be able to see there's an upper low spinning right here. That's actually causing a little bit of wind shear as well as the dry air. So that's what's happening over that area. What category? We're actually looking at a tropical storm right now. So Amanda asked me, it is currently not forecast to become a hurricane. That could change though. Now remember, the forecast track takes it as a tropical storm up to here at 70 miles an hour. Remember, the difference between a tropical storm and hurricane is only 4 miles per hour. And don't get caught up in categories. Category of storm is absolutely irrelevant. It's the impact, okay? Florence was basically a remnant tropical system and caused widespread flooding in the western Carolinas. Some of the worst flooding from Harvey was when it weakened to a tropical storm and depression. So don't get caught up in the category. Categories only have to do with the wind speed. Doesn't really tell you about flooding or duration of surge or how high surge can be. A lot of those factors aren't taken into account when the category of the storm is put together. One thing I did want to show you, and I'm going to pull it up here, is the rainfall forecast. I wish I would have grabbed this earlier, so bear with me as I'm going to grab this graphic just to show you the rainfall forecast over the southeast. I'm going to play this real quick, so I got to get this to populate. So there's a look at the rainfall forecast, 7-day rainfall forecast. And again, you look at this and you can see really heavy rain over Florida. If you look at some of these yellows, especially on the western side here, you're getting up in the 10 to 15 inch range over a 7-day period. So I really think rainfall is probably going to end up being the biggest impact from this. And notice not much rain up here in the Carolinas. It looks like the South Carolina coast southward is going to be the biggest impact over the next 7 days. So we don't see the impacts until after 7 days, which then puts us into the middle of next week. So let's see. What are the chances it stalls over land? Well, if it stalls over land, it would have to stall somewhere over here. It's not going to stall down here. And overall, there's another trough coming down that picks it up. So I don't think this is a Harvey or Florence. It's not going to stall. It doesn't look like anything like that right now. Let's see. Cancel Hilton Head trip this weekend? Absolutely not. I would not cancel any plans to the North or South Carolina coast for the weekend. There's no reason to. For a couple reasons. One, the storm won't be here. And second, even if we get some rain, it's just going to be rain. There's nothing to really, unless you want completely sunny skies, which is an impossibility over a holiday weekend anyways, I would not cancel my plans. The other reason I always tell people don't cancel plans until the storm actually gets closer is you may lose your deposit if you cancel now. If you wait till there's a tropical storm watch or warning or a hurricane watch or warning, you usually get your deposit back because that basically means you can't go. So don't cancel plans to the coast. How's the race looking for Darlington? Right now, this will not impact Darlington, but I do think there will be some scattered showers around on Sunday, mainly because we're going to have another frontal system kind of stalled to the south this weekend. So I do think there'll be showers around, but it won't be directly associated with Dorian. Do I think we'll have an active hurricane season? I actually think this season's going to end up being a little bit below average to near average. And I don't like looking at number of storms because we name everything now. One of the parameters I look at is called ACE. It's accumulated cyclone energy. It's a better metric for how big storms are, how long they last, and how powerful they are. And that's a much better metric. That accounts for big, long-lasting storms that have huge impacts, and not a bunch of little storms that don't really do anything. So I think from an ACE standpoint, it will be below average. Yep, no direct impact on the Carolinas, but we could see some indirect impacts of rain right now. And again, that's as of right now. It's Tuesday night. And again, I think a big thing to remember with this storm is just, I mean, this is the way it is now with social media and everything, is this storm is really far away. It is approximately 1,644 miles away from Charlotte. So, and it's only moving 13 miles an hour. It's a really far, if it was barreling right at us, it still would be about 8-9 days away. So it's a long ways out there. So I think it's way too early to worry about this storm until you start seeing the cone aimed at you, and then you start paying attention. But there's really no reason to, I think, worry about it until you get towards, the cone getting more towards you and becoming a significant storm. And again, this is the area, and probably the best graphic I can show you right now. Let's see, what about Savannah? Savannah, I mean, it's something to keep a closer eye on. I certainly think Sunday and Monday, you're a little bit closer to potentially some rain, but it all depends on where the circulation goes, because this is a small storm, so I don't expect the impacts to be spread out over a big area. So it's still kind of a wait-and-see mode in Savannah. But the first half of the weekend looks okay. How soon are we going to get water along the South Carolina coast? We'll probably, you're not going to see any water get churned up until the storm gets north of the Big Islands. Now, I will tell you this too, there is another system out there that's probably going to churn up the water first, and it's this Tropical Depression number 6. Now, this Tropical Depression 6, believe it or not, the circulation is over here. The storms are all sheared. This is actually going to push some swells and water towards the coast, but this thing is going this direction. So it's moving away, and I'll show you where this thing is going. It could become Tropical Storm Aaron, but that's a look at that system. So that's really not an impact on us, but it probably is going to churn up water more for the North Carolina Outer Banks, because it is going to push water back towards the coast. So just a heads up there. Any shift in the models north? So far, no. There hasn't been any major shift. The only thing that's happened that you can consider a shift, but it's not because the model shift. It's just because the low, or the circulation center of the tropical system, formed north. It reformed because the whole southern side is exposed now. That's not a healthy storm. There are some good thunderstorms in there, but the whole south side of the storm is exposed now. See all this dry air getting pulled in here? And once it gets towards Puerto Rico, the big mountains of Puerto Rico are going to start doing a number on it. So you know, the hurricane hunters are out there right now, and let me pull up the hurricane hunters data and see what they're finding out there, because I'm kind of curious to see if they're finding lower pressure or not. So what I'm pulling up right now is the hurricane hunters current flight in there. So current pressure that the hurricane hunters just found was 1,005 millibars, so no change currently from the 8 p.m. advisory as it's moving through there. So yeah, it's you know, Puerto Rico is really the area that needs to have full precautions for flash flooding and wind and a little bit of surge. So a couple more questions. Bahamas this weekend, not great. Bahamas will definitely be impacted, but it's not anything that the Bahamas can't deal with. Let's see. It's not stalling and it's not getting stronger right now. So no, Chris. Daytona would not be impacted until Sunday night. So Sunday night would be Daytona's impact, just to show you. So you can see Sunday, the storm is right there at 2 p.m. So Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, impacts possible near Daytona. Is there another system behind Dorian? Currently, no. Jacksonville will have to watch, because even a weak storm can push some pretty good surge into the St. Johns River. So Jacksonville, definitely a very surge-prone area. If this system gets stronger or bigger, and I mean stronger from an intensity standpoint, but also bigger from an aerial size, the water being pushed towards Jacksonville can cause some surge issues. So Jacksonville certainly needs to pay very close attention to the storm surge threats there. West Palm Beach, you might luck out. This thing is going to stay to your north. You'll be on the weaker side of the system. Might actually not be too bad until the storm gets over here and you get into some of these rain bands coming like that. So West Palm, pay attention mode right now for sure, but I think you're going to be on the south side of this thing, or the west side. Not really. The Gulf Stream, I'm getting a question, could it enlarge the Gulf Stream? Not really. Any chance of it turning north? Small chance. Chances dissipating, I answered that earlier before hitting Florida. There's about a 1 in 3 chance of it dissipating completely down in the Caribbean. That's still a distinct possibility. So that's kind of what we know right now. I mean, some of these questions are ultra specific, and it's just so far away. It's almost anything I tell you now is going to change over the next 3 or 4 days. This is what we know now. I can't be more specific than this general area to keep an eye on it, and this is the current track. There is potential that it weakens. Like I said, a 1 in 3 chance it falls apart completely. If dry air wins out and the wind shear and mountains of Puerto Rico destroyed, the outflow looks so impressive, but you see all these clouds spreading out, but notice there is nothing on the south side of this thing. The dry air is just getting sucked right in, and it's moving into a even worse environment. So there is potential it could dissipate. I am not going to lie to you. There's a chance it gets up here and becomes a hurricane as well. So those possibilities are still there. There's a 1 in 3 chance it does dissipate, though. But if it makes it through the mountains, the dry air and shear, all bets are off. Then it becomes more of an issue that we have to watch up towards the Bahamas. So that's what I'm thinking right now. I hope I answered as many questions as I could. I'll try to go through and answer some as I type them into Facebook and on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the app, wherever I can find them on my chat here. But I'll try to answer as many as possible. So hope you have a great night. I will try to do another one of these maybe tomorrow, but probably Thursday, because that's when we'll have a really good idea, because that's when it should reemerge from the Big Islands. I will do another one of these because we'll have a really good idea on impact on the mainland U.S. Puerto Rico tonight, thoughts and prayers to you folks. You've had a lot to deal with Maria 2 years ago, still recovering from that. Please be safe. This is going to be a huge flood threat, flash flooding especially, and winds up to 50 to 60 miles an hour.